word to wise. Grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about the new X-Men series by Jerry Duggan and Pepe Larraz. The first issue being launched, X-Men #1, under this new banner of X titles. Where previous issues were a series of one-shots, this is actually going to be a single, solid, continuous narrative. And in this video, we're going to learn what the X-Men are doing in New York and why what they're doing is kind of very important and has real nods and ties to actual events in the real world, and more importantly, who are these new villains that are now cropping up to face off with the X-Men and why they might be some of the most dangerous enemies the X-Men have faced in a long time. We're going to talk about all this and more right now, but first, if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and if you enjoy the video, I humbly ask that you Hulk smash that like button, because it really helps the channel out. All that aside, let's talk about X-Men #1. Okay, so right off rip, let's talk about what the X-Men are doing in New York. More specifically, why are they set up in what is essentially called Seneca Gardens, which is something that existed before Central Park, and the mutants of Krakoa have basically co-opted it and taken it back. And the reason why this isn't such a throwaway thing and is actually more important than what I think a lot of people are gonna, initially think about is the fact that this is actually what they're calling Seneca Gardens now. In this comic, actually used to be called Seneca Village. It was an area that was predominantly owned and operated by African Americans. The landscape, which is pretty much now Central Park's perimeter that kind of runs between West 82nd and West 89th Street, that used to be Seneca Village. This used to be one of the few African-American enclaves back in the day. Like, we're talking about something that kind of bordered along Black Wall Street and Rosewood. Like, it was something that was that big of a deal. It was a safe haven for not even just black people, but also for immigrants as well. This was a huge deal and something that was kickstarted as far back as 1825. But unfortunately, during the 1850s, that was when New York started planning the whole idea of creating Central Park, and this kind of led into some really ugly proceedings that ultimately led to Seneca Village basically being taken away. The city of New York ended up acquiring the land through eminent domain, which, for those who don't know what that means, eminent domain is basically a law that allows the government to take private land for public use with compensation paid to the landowner of said property. And this is something that was pretty common back in the 19th century. It's something that honestly still happens even now. And I know what some people are probably thinking, yes, the people who lived there were compensated for being removed from their homes. However, they weren't paid very much money. In many cases, a lot of them were probably lowballed and could have gotten way more for the land that they were trying to get, especially if you consider what they built out of that land once those individuals were gone. Well, small history lesson aside, the X-Men have taken Seneca Village, or that what used to be Seneca Village, now Seneca Gardens, and it basically turned it into a monument to mutant kind, and more importantly, mutant kind that has been lost. When we get to see this park, we even see a shot of John Proudstar, aka Thunderbird, who is referenced more than once in this comic. There's a mention that the new plane that the X-Men are going to be using isn't going to be called the Blackbird, but that they're thinking about calling it the Thunderbird or the Proudstar in honor of John Proudstar's sacrifice. Now, what sacrifice they're talking about exactly, that one is kind of tricky because it's not really made clear whether or not they're talking about the events of the sacrifice that he made that ultimately led to his character being killed off long term. Back during Chris Claremont's Uncanny X-Men number 94 or number 95, I'm kind of hazy on when that exactly happened, or whether or not this is due to the sacrifice that he made during the events of 2010's Chaos War, where basically most of the dead characters all came back because the afterlife, all the different types of afterlives were destroyed. Well, he came back during that event as a result of it. Technically not necessarily sacrifice himself, but he did technically play a pivotal role in helping stop the events of Chaos War and setting things back to rights, even though Hercules was technically more of the front runner on that one. All of that aside, this park is a free park. Anyone can come. It's not just like some kind of museum where people have to pay to get in. No, anyone can come and check out this park and witness mutant technology at work. It is free and open to the entire public. And not only is it that, it's where the X-Men have set their base of operations, creating what, by all accounts, is what they said overnight, a very impressive treehouse, something that started out as a bonsai tree and just ballooned up from there. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute because it does have something to do with something I want to talk about after the fact. However, one of the other things I thought was really interesting in this is that Ben Urich, who is, of course, a noted Daredevil character and probably one of the more well-known journalists in the Marvel Comics universe, and also an employee and technically co-owner of the Daily Bugle, he is interviewing Cyclops. And one of the things that comes up, and one of the things I do appreciate in this as well, is that Ben Urich obviously has been around for a long time. He's seen a lot of different things. I appreciate the fact that he's not being bigoted or, small-minded about the things that mutants are doing. He is very open and honest about the fact that at first he did take some pause at some of the things that they are accomplishing, some of the things that they're doing, but at the end of the day, he's even noting that everything the X-Men are doing, if the world is worried that they're suddenly going to take over the world and mutants are going to basically take over, the entire Earth, if they're doing it with kindness, if nothing else. But one of the things he brings up, and this is a point that's gonna probably pay more dividends a little later on down the road, is he gets invested in the death of Jumbo Carnation. Now, we've talked about the death of Jumbo Carnation in previous videos, namely in the Marauders side of things where Jumbo Carnation has showed up the most, but that is something that I think is of note because you also gotta remember, Jerry Duggan also wrote the Marauders. So it's no surprise that it's coming up here, but the idea that the world doesn't know what happened to Jumbo Carnation, even though Ben Urich himself said he actually was there, he was at the quarters, he actually saw Jumbo Carnation's body. So he's one of the few people in existence who actually knows for a fact Jumbo Carnation was actually dead, even though the press release that the world got about Jumbo Carnation simply made it seem as though he just took some time off, that he just disappeared from the public eye. Nothing bad happened to him, but in fact, something did happen to him. He was killed in what was essentially a hate crime. And Ben Urich is digging into this, and it's probably going to be against his best interest, but it's also going to be in the interest of one of our new villains. And now when we get into our new villains, one of them being a character by the name of Dr. Stasis, who works for or operates some organization called the Oblivion Institute. We don't really know who this guy is. We don't know exactly what it is they're up to precisely, but whoever they are doing something in the realm of genetics where they're trying to basically create a better version of humanity. This isn't anything new that we've seen though, because we've seen this in regards to post-humans. We've seen this in regards to Xeno trying to create the next big thing. We've even seen this with the human in the pages of Vita Ayala's Children of the Atom, where they're trying to create the third species. They're trying to create the next step in human evolution, a new species to supplant mutants. Basically how mutants supplanted humans as the dominant force on Earth. They are trying to do the same thing to mutants, and this guy seems to be doing about roughly the same thing, constantly testing out experiments, trying to create a new type of human. And one of the things I thought was very interesting here is the fact that this guy is incredibly callous, cold, calculating, and honestly probably the scariest thing about them is just how they don't seem to care or value human life in regards to the work that they're doing, the science that they're trying to do. The human that they are testing on, who for all intents and purposes looks normal until you see the extra legs and arms or appendages or whatever that are protruding from this person's back, and they start bombarding this person with all kinds of radiation and energy to the point that the person survives for a little while and then they ultimately die. Something that seems to not so much upset Dr. Stasis, but seems to merely annoy them. And whoever this is somebody who feels put off by what Krakoa has brought to the table. This is not even a new thing either, not a new concept at all. A lot of the new villains, or not a lot of, but at least some of the new villains we've seen pop up in the X-Men's corner of the Marvel Comics universe have been a direct result of Krakoa unveiling technology and accomplishments that another person was already working on. This is something that actually comes up in the pages of this week's X-Force number 21, the idea of multiple discovery. People coming up with the same idea in completely different areas of the world with no communication whatsoever between them, but they come up with very similar ideas, if not the exact same idea, about roughly the exact same time. Where Beast uses the example of the crossbow, saying that it was created in Greece, Africa, northern Canada, and China around roughly the exact same time. This is something that when they're they're talking about this in X-Force, they're talking about the idea of how Krakoa came up with the mutant medicines and Krakoan technology about roughly the same time that the people of Terra Verde were coming up with telephoronics, which is about roughly the exact same thing. More or less, this guy, what he's talking about is how Krakoa has come up with ways of mutant resurrection, and they are trying to figure out the same thing. Their focus is trying to figure out how mutants are resurrecting their dead, and the person that they're studying, or at least one of the people that's on their list, is Jumbo Carnation, following the same thread that Ben Urich is following. What happened to Jumbo Carnation, and how the hell did they come back? This person even has the death certificate of Jumbo Carnation, so it just makes you wonder even more, like, who is this person and what are they up to? Speaking of villains who are pissed about the fact that Krakoa beat them to something, we learn about a gentleman by the name of Kelvin Hung, a kid who ultimately grew up to basically get screwed over by his own parents. This guy basically made over $100 million in one day based off an IPO that he obtained at age 15, and his parents took advantage of him and basically ruined his accomplishments, and he ultimately changed his name and created a new identity, Fei Long, even creating a company by the same name. And apparently one of the things this guy was studying was turning lifeless deserts into lush green lands. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? Guess what the Krakoans did that basically made his accomplishments worthless? This guy was literally working towards turning Mars into a lush green land, no different than what the mutants of Krakoa did in Planet-Size X-Men #1. When the Hellfire Gala occurred, basically everything he had done, everything he had tried to accomplish was ruined. This guy now has a vendetta against mutant kind. As a result of mutants terraforming Mars and turning it into planet Araco, this has upset him, and now he is going to do everything he can to make them pay. Even a line brought up in this talking about how changing his body for Mars was far easier than changing Mars for his body, which kind of leads me to believe he's going to wind up doing something, maybe something along the lines of what the later villain we learn about, Dr. Stasis, as we talked about earlier. Something tells me he's going to wind up going roughly about the same route, maybe even doing something along the lines of what Orcus and the Posthumans are doing to get back at Krakoa. Now, of course, after the fact, we learn someone somewhere has sent some kind of an alien creature to New York to self-replicate and destroy any mammalian life on the planet. Now, that's a very specific thing. Why only mammals? Well, the reason why is because another new villain that's being introduced is a character by the name of Cordyceps Jones, a character who now runs this operation called Game World, where time and everything, because of the nature of the fact that it's wedged between two singularities, it makes time move at a much slower pace. There's even a line thrown out that says if you wanted to stay on the resort, you could spend a month there over your own weekend, because in 2 days, that's how much time actually passes there versus where you were. And what they're doing is they're holding and staging these games where these creatures are sent down and people are gambling and betting on it. And with this latest monster that was sent down, this wasn't just some random act of violence. This was Cordyceps Jones throwing something at Earth and allowing the people in Game World to gamble on it. But that's not the only thing Cordyceps Jones is after. Cordyceps Jones, who we're showing right here, is a very interesting creature. This is some kind of a fungus, like an actual full-on Cordyceps fungus, which for those of you who are not familiar, the Cordyceps fungus, it is an actual real thing. And I know some people probably, if you've ever played the video game series The Last of Us, you'll be like, oh, that's that thing that turned people into plant zombies, and you would be correct. However, this is something that's even on a even stranger level, because this Cordyceps is piloting what appears to be a human body, which is in some kind of an astronaut suit, and this body is completely dead, down to basically being a skeleton. But Cordyceps Jones controls this body, even showing how he can manipulate the body's arms as it raises a toast towards its patrons. A very interesting creature, I might add, but what is going on here is that Cordyceps Jones apparently has had his eyes set on Earth. They want to take it over. They feel that this is a planet that is in their inhabitable zone, and they find it very unfortunate and incredibly inconvenient that mutants and humans are overrunning it. They feel that this planet is wasted on them. They're going to keep staging these little games, and the object now has become for the people, the patrons of Game World, to destroy the Earth Earthlings to destroy humanity in all its forms, all mammalian life on the planet, without destroying the Earth itself. I even like the line that we see in this where Cordyceps throws out the whole, it'd be a perfect neighborhood if it weren't for the Earthlings. A very common line that gets thrown around that is usually referring to minorities and immigrants and other marginalized groups, but I find it very interesting that Cordyceps Jones is basically throwing that out here, but in regards to humanity as a whole. There's also another character that gets focused on a little bit that I feel like I should know who it is, but I also at the same time feel like this is probably another new character that Duggan is getting ready to throw our way. But yeah, Duggan has basically introduced to us potentially 3 new villains that are going to be knocking down the Krakoan's doors. The X-Men are going to have to deal with this now, and it's going to be something very interesting to see. This comic actually did a lot of really awesome things. The whole treehouse deal, which I think is a very interesting thing. I think it's a very nice touch. Like, once again, I don't ever want to go back to the mansion. They can go to whatever the other types of clubhouses, tree houses, whatever they want to do. Just don't go back to the mansion. That was my biggest fear when it came to this new era of X-Men, was that, oh man, they're just going to wind up going back to the mansion at some point, which I mean, eventually, yes, they probably will, but I hope it's a long ways off. Another thing I took note of here, and this is something I thought was pretty cool, and some people will probably think that this is something that we haven't seen before, but technically we kind of have, but I thought it was really cool that, Sync's powers, we're getting to see exactly how they've been upgraded since he has been resurrected. That to the point where Forge even brings up that Sync uses Forge's abilities just as good as he does, and that even later on in the comic, when they're creating the X-Mech to fight off the giant alien monster that Cordyceps Jones sends to Earth, he is still synced to Forge, even though Forge is nowhere nearby, and he's still able to use Forge's powers, and that's how he's able to concoct an idea, which, by the way, not only was that just Forge's abilities, but Sync is also a very, very gifted battle tactician and strategist. So that wasn't just him using Forge's powers, that was even using his own intelligence to craft a plan that actually worked in creating a giant mecha using the abilities of everyone around them and using it to basically Pacific Rim this entire comic, which I thought was really cool. I'm very curious to see what they're going to do with this mech later on. It's highly implied that the mech is going to be hanging around for a bit longer, like it's not going away anytime soon. I also appreciated the fact that we learned that not only was the treehouse something that was concocted by the X-Men themselves, but even characters who aren't on the X-Men team. We learned that the character Tempo, who we made a huge campaign for to try and get on this team, a character that Jerry Duggan themselves even came out openly saying that they voted for this character to be on their team, but at the end of the day, that character was not on the table and they couldn't put the character on the team, but they did say maybe next time. But Forge, another character who was also up to be on the team, I thought was really cool that, he brings up that both of these characters were instrumental, Tempo especially, in the creation of the treehouse, how she basically took this bonsai tree, this little small bonsai tree of Krakoa, and used her abilities to age it into one of the tallest structures in all of New York. And she did it overnight. Not only that, but the treehouse itself apparently is something that's even more natural structure than anything that's even in New York at this point. There's even mentions of the fact that a snow owl shows up to it, that the birds sing louder at this location, that the air is fresher because of what Krakoa can offer. But anyways, that's everything that I thought was of note in this comic. I really enjoyed this issue. I know this issue's kind of caught a little bit of flack because people feel like it didn't have enough character development in it, which, I mean, it was the first issue. They were introducing a lot of things. I kind of expect that character development to come up in later issues, but either way, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was fun. I love the new concepts that are being introduced. A lot of the X comics this week are introducing some really, really interesting narrative points that I think people are gonna be talking about for a while, and I feel like this was an awesome thing because I know that a lot of people, one of the biggest complaints I've heard people say is that, oh, there's no core X-Men title, there's no core X-Men story, and this is the X-Men kind of getting back to grassroots, getting back to being heroes again, because everybody thinks they're villains now. And it was really cool because even seeing the Avengers and the Fantastic Four welcome the X-Men back to being traditional superheroes, it was a really cool touch. I thought it was something really nice. It was really nice seeing the new group, even though once again, my biggest criticism of the group as a whole is that it is an incredibly white group. It is incredibly white group. It is the most vanilla X-Men team I think I've ever seen in my life. But you know, hey, it is what it is. Maybe we'll see that change. Maybe we'll see characters like Forge and Tempo play a little bit more of a role, even they won't be, you know, core X-Men. Maybe they will be adjacent enough that, and we'll see them pop up enough that it'll kind of even things out. But that said, if you enjoy this video, Hulk smash that like button and make sure to share this video all over the internet and with all your friends so they'll know how you leveled up your comic book big brain in regards to Jerry Duggan's relaunch of the X-Men. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know what you thought about X-Men #1. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.